Hi, I'm Bob, and this is Suzanne.
Hi.
And today we're going to talk about some of the books that I picked up at the Sackson auction held back in November of 2002. Now, Suzanne, I went to the auction on that weekend, and Friday night they held an auction to dispose of all of Sid's books. Saturday was the auction to get rid of about half of his games. There were a lot of books at the auction. I wasn't interested in most of them. I have a large collection of books on games and puzzles, and books are heavy, and I was going to have to ship all this stuff back to Colorado. As a result, I didn't bid on most of the lots. However, there was one lot that I bidded on, and it contained it was basically a shoebox. And the shoebox was full of pamphlets and booklets. Half of them or more were German. The other half were in English. They went from about the 1880s up until 1950s. About half of them were in the 1800s, and the other half were in the 20th century. So I thought I'd show you some of what was in that shoebox.
Great.
The first book we have here is called A Handbook of Reversi and Halma, etc. And I know you can't see it because it's a green book and we were using a green screen. However, the book was from 1889. It was published in London. It covered Reversi, Phaneroma, Invasion, and Halma, which are four abstract board games that were popular back at the turn of the century. Then we have three books that are called Games Digest, and these were edited by Eli Culberson, who was a famous bridge player back in the 30s. And so these came out. The first one I have here is Volume 1, Number 1. It came out in September of 1937. And these had card games, board games, dice games, and other types of games. And they're very novel, very interesting books. The next one that came out of that auction was this little pamphlet here on a game that can be where you can use tarot cards for playing a trump game. We have here Fleischer Platt's Navigational War Game, and that was from about 1950. And then we had a whole series of German books. One of the interesting ones was this one here, which was written by the founder of Ravensburger.
Oh, wow.
Otto Robert Ravensburger, who founded the company back in 1883. This book came out in the early 1900s, and it has all kinds of abstract board games in it. It has about 7 pages of ads for Ravensburger games. And here's another book that covers a bunch of German games back at the turn of the century as well. Most of the other books that were in German covered either chess variants, dominoes, or abstract board games. I'll put a few of them up on the screen so people can see what they look like. But the real reason I wanted to buy this particular lot was with this booklet here, which is in German. The name of the booklet in German is Two War Games. One of the war games is a variation of chess, and the second one is a card game called Mate. And I believe all of these booklets that I showed you came from the same book dealer that Sid knew in New York City. This guy did a vast business in old books regarding chess and checkers. And sometimes he got in books related to games, not chess and checkers, that he put on a shelf. And Sid would go and see him every now and then and ask him what he had. And so this particular book here, the bookkeeper's wife told Sid that this was a good booklet and he should translate it from German to English because the game was worthwhile. And so what Sid did is he took this and a dictionary, German-English dictionary, and translated the rules to the game. And this was the first game that he published in his book, A Gamut of Games, which is a well-known book that Sid wrote back in 1969.
I read it.
And as Sid mentions, this particular game book was published in 1915 during World War I. And he said that this is the only known copy of the book, with the exception of one that's in a museum in the Netherlands. So it's a relatively scarce book. And as I said, the name of the game is Mate. And it's a game played with 20 cards, 20 playing cards. And it doesn't take long to play. You deal out 10 cards to each player, and you play the round. And then you switch cards, and I play with your cards, you play with my cards, we play it again. Then we have a second deal, and once again we have 2 rounds. And then the game is over, and whoever has the most points wins. And I played this game a lot. I was on the road back in the 1970s, from about 1976 to 84. I was on the road for 8 years with a Fortune 500 company doing audits around the country. And back then at that time, you didn't have cell phones and other things to keep you occupied when you're on a 2-hour flight. And so the airlines would give you, for the asking, a set of playing cards. And so I typically would ask for a set of playing cards, or I'd have one in my briefcase, and I bring up a conversation with the guy beside me. And we typically ask, would you like to learn a card game that's very simple? It only requires 10 cards for each player, and but it's pure skill. And most of the time the people would say yes just to amuse me, and we'd play the game. And they would get kind of frustrated after playing it a few times because they typically wouldn't win the game. And but I thought it was a great game.
Of course.
I loved introducing it to people. And actually, I don't know if you remember or not, but the first time that we went together, we caught a train down to Fort Lauderdale from West Palm Beach.
I remember.
And I showed you the game.
Yes.
And you played it, and you did fairly well. You
I think I
you
won.
won 1 round out of 3, which is better than most people do when they first learn the game. And so it said to me that you had the necessary gray matter to continue to pursue you. And so anyway.
So it was a test.
Well, it wasn't a test, but it's a game that I always enjoy teaching people. And anybody who wins at least 1 round during their introduction to the game has a pretty good aptitude toward board games. So what we'll do is I will explain the game and how it's played. And there is a link from this YouTube video that will take you to a web page that I put up several years ago about the game of Mate.
Oh.
And it has the full instructions there. It has links to places you can go on the web and play the game online if you don't want to play it with another person and a deck of cards. But I think this is a fascinating game, and because the booklet was very scarce, I went ahead and bid about $45 and won the lot. I remember I was sitting next to Bruce Whitehill at the time, and after I won the lot and brought it back in this shoebox full of papers, Bruce looked at me and said, what did you just buy? He didn't know what it was. I don't think most people knew what was in the box. I think it was really one of the best lots there if you like obscure games. And as I said, most of these games, I believe, came from the same source that Sid knew back in New York City. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and show people how to play the game of Mate. Okay, here we are. We've got a total of 20 cards that we've dealt out. The cards are the ace, the 10, the king, the queen, and the 6 of the 4 suits. And the ranking of the cards in strength is the ace is the strongest, followed by the 10. The king is next, followed by the queen and the 6. And the rankings of the suits, clubs is the strongest, followed by spades, followed by hearts, and followed by diamonds. So this hand here is my hand, and the one down there is my opponent. And so my opponent has dealt this hand out, which means that I'm going to start to lead on the play of the cards. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at my hand, and I'm going to see what I have 3 or 4 of a kind of. And I have 3 aces, which is great, and I have 3 queens. 1, 2, 3 queens. Where I'm weakest at is I only have 1 10, and I only have 1 6. And so the way the play works, I'm going to lead a card, and my opponent needs to follow in suit if at all possible. If they can't follow in suit, then they have to play a card of the same rank. And then when the 2 cards are played, whichever is the strongest card starts to lead the second card of the hand. And it keeps going back and forth where we each play a card and respond to our opponent's leads, and until someone mates. And the way you mate is you play a card from your hand that your opponent cannot follow in suit, and he cannot follow in rank. For example, if I were to play the ace of clubs, and my opponent didn't have any clubs and didn't have any aces, then I would mate. And you can see that this is the number of points each of these cards is worth. So the ace is worth 11 points, the 10 is worth 10 points, the king is 4, the queen is 3, and the 6 is worth 6 points. So you want to mate with a 10 or an ace if possible, and you want to mate as late in the hand as possible, because whatever card it is in your hand that you played, it would be multiplied times the point value. For example, if I won with the 8th card played in my hand, and I played, like I said, the ace of clubs, it would be 8 times 11 is 88 points for me. And so what would happen then is I'm going to take my cards and give it to my opponent. My opponent is going to give me his cards, and we're going to replay the hand with my opponent going first. So that takes any luck out of the draw. And of course, when you play, you don't normally have the cards laid out like this. You have the cards in your hand. However, it's very important to keep in your mind what cards your opponent has left in his hands so that you can maximize your point total by mating. By the same token, you want to take a look and figure out, is this hand going to be a card that is going to be a hand that is going to probably win the hand because it's a stronger hand based upon the cards that are in the hand. If it's a weak hand, which means that it's not going to typically mate your opponent, then what you typically want to do is you want to play the hand in such a way so that you get mated as soon as possible in the game with the lowest number of points. So when I look at my hand here, I go, well, my hand here is a stronger hand. I've got 3 clubs and I got 3 spades, the 2 dominant suits. I have 3 aces and I have 3 queens. This guy looks at his hand and says, "Oh, I got a weak hand here. I have fewer cards than the major suits, and while I have a lot of diamonds, which means that I can use one of those diamonds to mate someone," he says, "what I have to mate with is basically a 10 or a 6. And so notice I have a 10 here and I have a 6 here. So as soon as I play one of those 2 cards, if he gets back in the lead, he could play a 10 or a 6 to mate me once he gets my queen off the board. So we'll go ahead and we'll play the hand. And I'm going to go first. And I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to say, well, I'm going to play the king of spades. And my opponent is forced to play either a 6 or a 10. So he's going to go, let's say, he takes the lead. He plays a 10. Since 10 is over king, he now has the lead. And he's going to play the king of diamonds. Okay, which is forcing me to play my queen of diamonds. So now I no longer have any diamonds on the board, and he knows that if he gets rid of my 6 or my 10 here, he can mate with one of his diamonds. So what he's going to do next is okay, so at this point my opponent may play the king of hearts, hoping that I would play my 6 of hearts. Bottom line is that once I get rid of my 6, he can mate me if he's in the lead. I would come back and I would play my ace of hearts. So that would put me in the lead. And the next thing I would do was play the queen of spades, which would force my opponent to play the 6 of spades. Then I would play the ace of spades. Since he doesn't have any more spades, that would force my opponent to play the ace of diamonds. What I would do then is I would play the king of clubs. And that would force my opponent to play either the 6 or the queen. We'll say he plays the 6. I would then play the 10 of clubs, which forces him to play his queen. And finally, I would mate with the ace of clubs. He doesn't have any clubs, and he doesn't have any aces. So the ace is the 8th card played. So I would take 8 and multiply it by 11, which would give me 88 points. And at this point, what we would do is I would pick up my cards, he would pick up his cards, and we would swap them back and forth. And now he would have the lead, and we would play the same hand out. He knows that he wants to do better, or at least as good as I did with 88 points. On the other hand, I want to make sure that he scores less than 88 points. We play the second round, and then we deal the cards again and play a new round, and we once again swap the cards, so to have a total of 4 hands played, and whoever has the most points at the end of those 4 hands is declared the winner, and that's mate. Well, we hope you enjoyed this video on a look back at the 2002 Sid Sackson auction and some of the booklets that were purchased. Please subscribe to this channel and click on the bell to receive automatic notifications every time new content is added to the website. You may want to go to the AGPI website at www.agpi.org.
Amazing information.
There's 35 years of periodicals in flipbook format. Anyway, until next time, goodbye.
Bye.